Life in our world exists in places of both extremity and mildness. When talking about monsters, there is a temptation to focus only on the ferocious beasts found living in the harshest conditions. Warriors that brave the molten magma of the volcanic belt, or nomads that resist the slashing gales of the snowy mountains. This focal tendency has the unintended effect of implying that less harsh environments are home to less powerful creatures. After all, the lands of the frontier are covered not just in hellish wastelands, but also forests, plains, and gentle hills. And it would be a mistake to assume that those milder regions are incapable of producing truly fearsome monsters. For just one example, let us turn our attention to a tall mountain range in the east called the Misty Peaks. A blanket of trees sits upon a landscape defined by tall, spire-like mountains that pierce the heavens. Gentle streams trickle down from the higher levels into the lower basin, where large lakes provide humid habitats for all sorts of critters. While many creatures prowl these woods, one is most likely to encounter a gargua, a clumsy and rotund bird wyvern that poses no threat at all. In many ways, this area is the picture of tranquility. Similarly tranquil is the settlement that sits nestled in this beautiful mountain region, Yukumo Village. Blessed with hot springs that soothe the soul, this town is renowned for its relaxing and rejuvenating atmosphere. Merchants, hunters, and even tourists pass through this little village year-round. And it is the presence of hunters that ought to be a clue as to the Misty Peaks' true nature. Because despite its idyllic appearance, this region too is home to some truly formidable monster species. One such monster was long known about not by sight, but by the traces it left behind. Tremors would regularly shake the quiet forest, and villagers that would go to investigate what had happened would stumble across fallen trees, knocked over by some great force, and their bark chewed off by massive jaws. Once the Hunters Guild increased its presence in the area, these tales were followed up on empirically, and before long, the culprit was sighted. It was a gigantic brute wyvern species that came to be known as Duramboros. Duramboros are large bipedal wyverns with degenerated front limbs and powerful hind legs. Their huge brown bodies are covered in green patches and are notable for their large central hump, which gives the beast a hunched-over stance. The large body is balanced on the front end by a pair of massive curved horns, and at the back end by a spherical tail tip adorned with numerous sharp shell discs jutting out of it. Looking at one even from afar, one might imagine all the grisly slaughter such a massive monster might get up to. That would be premature, however, as Duramboros are entirely herbivorous and exclusively feed on trees. That does not mean that they are docile, though. Duramboros need an extreme amount of food per day, and are thus very protective of the forests they claim as their own, anxious about potentially missing out on valuable calories. Duramboros can be found in many different forested regions, where they stake out large territories in which they feed freely. While they are colloquially called herbivores, their actual situation is a little more complicated. Duramboros subsist primarily on trees and their wood. They ascertain the quality of any one tree by sniffing it, and it has been suggested that individual Duramboros have particular preferences and tastes. Once a Duramboros finds a tree that seems appetizing, it will ready its most valuable tool, its enormous tail tip. It is maybe the most absurd feature of the Duramboros, a sphere of hardened shell with numerous sharp discs jutting out from it. This large structure is specially adapted for felling trees, as the sphere adds weight to the tail swing while the discs cut through wood with ease. The tail tip is so vital to the Duramboros, in fact, that it possesses significant regenerative abilities, being able to partially regrow the shell discs if they are chipped or broken. Using this wonder of nature, the Duramboros fells trees that it wishes to feast on. Wood is, however, not an easy substance to gain energy from, especially in quantities that support such a large body. This is why the Duramboros employs a little trick to get an extra edge, the complication to its herbivory. It selects its trees not merely on taste, but also on the amount of a particular species of insect that lives on it and in it. As a Duramboros feeds, it also ingests these insects, whose body fluids can be turned into a special enzyme that helps with extracting nutrients from wood. By thus creating a slurry of this enzyme and depositing it alongside its meal within its 4 stomachs, the Duramboros can slowly but surely digest even the roughest plant matter and sustain itself. But even when using this trick, a Duramboros still needs to consume an extraordinary amount of wood to get enough nutrition out of it. This is partially due to the fact that it does not merely eat to satiate itself in the moment. The hump of a Duramboros serves as fat storage and must be enlarged and filled with energy. Duramboros hate the cold, and thus spend the winter season in hibernation by digging themselves into the ground and slumbering until the warm sun returns. And so to survive this hibernation, a Duramboros must stockpile fat and energy in its hump, which is why it eats continuously during the warm season. An abundance of trees is thus the Duramboros' lifeline, which it protects furiously. Generally, this creature goes unopposed, as few monsters fancy a fight with this behemoth. Duramboros are covered head to toe in their characteristic brown armor shell, which forms from multiple sturdy scales fusing into larger plates. This armor already offers a significant degree of protection, and the Duramboros once again improves its standing with a clever adaptation. The scales do not fuse smoothly, but instead leave behind many jagged seams and irregularities, causing the surface of the shell to be rough and somewhat reminiscent of natural rock formations. As a result, various types of fungi and moss make their home on the wyvern's body, growing into a thick layer of vegetation that covers the Duramboros' body in patches. This constitutes a form of symbiosis. Moss and fungi get a place to grow mostly in peace, while they provide the Duramboros with additional defense in form of insulation, moisture retention, and shock absorption. In emergencies, a Duramboros may even choose to eat the moss off of its own body. Protected by shell and moss, the Duramboros has little to fear. Most other monsters avoid provoking it, but sometimes trouble still stirs. The hump of a Duramboros is essentially a nutritional treasure trove, and is, in addition, not nearly as well protected as the rest of the body. The armor plating around it is thin, and the interior is entirely made of juicy, nutritious, soft flesh. Accessing it would thus be of great benefit to any predator. If only an enraged Duramboros wasn't such a terrifying sight. When it chooses to engage an enemy, a Duramboros will generally rely on its size and weight to crush them. Charges and body checks are a common maneuver for this brute wyvern, and it has also been known to stomp on adversaries with its large feet. But its most dangerous weapon is, of course, the tail. Unsurprisingly, a direct hit from the heavy tip of the tail will instantly kill most enemies, either by crushing them or slicing them apart with the shell discs. But once again, the Duramboros can use a special trick to enhance its deadliness. When facing a threat worthy of a bit of extra effort, the Duramboros will begin to spin in place, swinging its tail in an accelerating circular motion. The weight of the tip produces a strong centrifugal force that pulls against the center of the monster's body. By jumping once the tail tip has gained enough momentum, the Duramboros can launch itself tail first at enemies, combining its mass with the gathered speed. It can also jump upwards to then come crashing down with its heavy body. Needless to say that this move is extremely deadly. Attacks such as these do, however, strain the monster. Duramboros tire quickly, and might even begin burning the fat in their humps in prolonged combat. When that happens, a special sweat-like substance is produced on the hump and evaporated rapidly by the monster's body temperature, making it seem like the hump is expelling vapor. While observing turf wars involving Duramboros, researchers made a peculiar observation. Despite having large and impressive horns, the monster seemed extremely reluctant to use them in combat. While it would rarely perform jittery headbutts on smaller enemies, the Duramboros generally avoided involving its horns when fighting. This oddity was only resolved once a Duramboros skull was recovered and analyzed. The massive horns are direct extensions of the skull bone, with their base making direct contact with the cranial cavity and thus the brain. This shed new light on the Duramboros' timid use of its horns. Suffering any damage to them could easily cause brain damage if the base shattered inwards. A headbutt would thus have potentially lethal consequences for the wyvern. Other observations noted that even slight impacts of the horns could cause dizziness and confusion in the monster. This, of course, begged the question: if the horns were not just useless in combat, but an active liability to the monster's survival, why had they developed at all? Were they just an oddity of evolution? The answer to this came only once researchers were able to observe intra-species relations within the Duramboros species. Duramboros society values many different status symbols. The arrangement of the moss and mushrooms on the shell, for example, seem to be signifiers of a general social hierarchy, with the most dominant Duramboros being the ones that are entirely covered in large and healthy flora. The horns thus serve a similar purpose. They are sexual features that determine which males will succeed in finding a mate. Larger, more impressive horns are thus more likely to result in successful courtship. Naturally, males with similar horns will thus engage in disputes to determine which one has the superior set. This, however, presents a dilemma for the Duramboros. The most expedient way to display the superiority of one's horns would be to clash them against those of one's rival, proving their strength in battle. But that is not a desirable option here, as any impact or injury to the horns could be deadly to both fighters. Duramboros thus find different ways to compete. Specifically, rival males dig their horns into the soil and throw mounds of earth and dust into the air to display their horn's strength and size. These standoffs can last for hours, as Duramboros will avoid a physical fight with their peers at all costs. After mating has occurred, female Duramboros will lay their eggs and guard them alongside other females. It seems to be customary for female Duramboros to live in small groups, while the males are solitary. It is in fact believed that the vast majority of the Duramboros sighted in the Misty Peaks are such lonesome males. While the males roam the forests alone, their young hatch under the watchful eyes of their mother and her associates. Juvenile Duramboros are roughly 2 meters long and are born without the ability to digest plant matter. That will only develop as the bacterial colonies in their stomachs mature. In the meantime, the juveniles subsist on mushrooms, fallen tree nuts, and the nutritious dung of the female adults around them. Their youth is mostly spent on grooming their tails. Duramboros are born with jagged, uneven tail tips, which must be shaped into the spherical mallets seen in adults by repeatedly slamming them into the ground, slowly rounding them through impact and pressure. Once the young mature, they will leave the group that raised them regardless of sex and set out on their own. Duramboros are majestic creatures, wardens of a tranquil forest whose size and power inspire awe and respect. And while this species has been studied extensively, many mysteries still surround it. For example, it has been found that these wyverns produce a special mineral inside of their bodies called durambolite. It is not unusual for monsters to produce gems as a byproduct of their metabolism, but this mineral is nonetheless odd, and nothing is currently known about its purpose. But one of the broader questions about the Duramboros concerns its diversity. As it is so bound to the trees it eats and the flora that attach to it, it has been proposed that this is a species that would likely result in many subspecies and subtypes due to environmental factors. It has already been confirmed that the exact types of moss and fungi that grow on any Duramboros' shell vary depending on where that individual lives, so a degree of regional variation appears likely. This has led to the hypothesis that there are in fact many Duramboros subspecies to be found in many different habitats, with their appearance and ecology changing in accordance with environmental factors such as humidity, temperature, and available food. And while there have since been many sightings of Duramboros in varying colors, only one such case led to an actual official discovery. After reports told of massive brute wyverns in desert regions, the guild was able to confirm the existence of the first Duramboros subspecies, named rust Duramboros. Broadly resembling common Duramboros, this species can be distinguished by its copper-colored shell covered in brown patches of small desert plants and mushrooms. Rust Duramboros are also larger than the common species, and are in fact considered to be the largest known brute wyverns by some scholars. The tail tip is also slightly different, with the shell discs fanning out to the side more and giving the overall structure a more axe-like shape. Besides visual descriptions, very little is known about this desert-dwelling subspecies, as it has only been sighted a handful of times. The tail seems to be adapted to displacing large amounts of sand when swung, which has been theorized to aid in digging up cacti and other desert plants to maximize nutrition in the desert. They are also much more aggressive than the forest species, and will actively attack other monsters when they spot them. It has even been said that the shell of a Ras Duramboros takes on its color due to the monster covering itself in the blood of slain enemies, not unlike the behavior seen in Sand Barioth. The hypothetical danger of a creature of this size being an active aggressor has led to the Ras Duramboros being one of the very few regular monsters to require additional special permission from the Hunters Guild to be hunted. This precaution has, however, not come into play often, as Ras Duramboros appear to be extremely rare and have not been sighted in many years. Thank you all so much for watching, and as usual, a very special thank you to all of the members who support this channel on Patreon and through YouTube channel memberships. I would like to especially thank Admiral Frost, Alistair in Wonderland, Anjanath Tamer's Ambience, Artur Centeno, Autumns, Bruggy, British Empire, B, Chocolate Coat, Christopher Bronson, Claire Miboon, Dragonlord, Dissy, Theopuz, Hubbo Himbro Mirror, Harpir, Hashi, Hellbug Hunter, Inepts, Jacob Coleman, Jacob Denumnut, Joey Tribby 58, Magenta, Joshua Ellison, Uriv, Carl the Crab, Kelly Barnett, Kogath, Lexages, Lifadienst, Lufish, Lucana, Small Chaos, M1Have12, Makamawi, Makot 02, Mathat 124, Meta Defiance, Mr. Pyramid, Molly Mockery, Morgul Blank, Mr. Gayballs, My Name Gone, Nils Schlatter, Person 212, Precum King, Puke Supremacy, Panonym, Quali, Rambling Robin, Raspberry, Regal Eagle, Resident Neko Arc, Ronger 97, Rose, Ryan Hook, Skiba, Sir Newt, Soruka, Suddenly, Tacti Wolf, The Dollarfish, Thick, Phyla Zero, Uthduna is an Octopus, Veraxis, Wandering Soul, Zaffi, Zion HV Oggenson, Zyperius Volkvar, Shebo, Kuroneko, Oakwood Tree, Iron Camel, and Nah, I'm going to bed. Take care everyone, bye bye, see you next time.